The rain over Virginia Beach came down in sheets, a steady percussion against the windows of the Naval Base conference room. Inside, the air was still and heavy, pressurized by something far more suffocating than humidity. Commander Jack Hawk Morrison stood with his arms crossed, his square jaw tight enough to crack granite. At 42, he had 16 years of SEAL experience etched into the lines around his eyes, and a reputation for being impossible to impress. Across the table stood Maya Rivas. She was 5'6", lean with the wiry strength of a rock climber, and her dark hair was pulled into a severe bun. She wore standard civilian attire, dark jeans and a fitted long-sleeve shirt, but she carried herself with the quiet stillness of someone who had learned to be invisible. On paper, her credentials were unusual. A former freelance maritime security consultant, multilingual, specialized in high-risk extraction logistics. But paper meant nothing in this room. Commander Morrison did not look at the paper. He looked at her. "You want to join my teams as a civilian contractor," he said. His voice was flat, not hostile, but not welcoming either. It was the voice of a man who had buried friends and trained men who had since buried others. "You've got no combat MOS, no time in any branch I recognize, yet someone upstairs thinks you belong in the room when we plan operations that cost millions of dollars and human lives." Maya met his gaze. "I'm not asking to pull trigger. I'm asking to read the room before anyone gets there." A ghost of a smirk tugged at Morrison's mouth, but it wasn't kind. "We don't need a psychic. And we need proof." He gestured to the men flanking him. Two senior chiefs, both with forearms like oak limbs and eyes that had seen too much. One of them, Chief Petty Officer Danvers, stepped forward. He was the team's lead breacher, a man who solved problems with controlled explosions and overwhelming violence. He looked at Maya the way a wolf looks at a deer that has wandered into the wrong valley. "Okay," Danvers said. "Prove it." The test was practical. On the wall behind them was a classified satellite image of a compound near the Horn of Africa. It was a mock scenario, but the stakes felt real. Danvers described the OP, a suspected high-value target, 2 buildings, unknown number of hostiles, civilian population nearby. "Standard direct action," Danvers concluded. "We breach, clear, secure, exfil. Your job, consultant, is to tell us what we're missing." Maya stepped closer to the image. She didn't touch it. She just looked. For 30 seconds, the room heard nothing but rain. Then she spoke. "Your breach point is the east wall. It's the obvious choice. Low cover, direct line to main structure. But the ground here," she pointed to a faint discoloration on the print, "is recently graded. Could be a septic field. Could be an IED trap. You hit that wall, you're not breaching. You're detonating." Danvers blinked. He didn't respond. She continued, her finger tracing an invisible path. "And the well. Satellite shows activity here at dawn and dusk. Women and children. If you come in hot, they scatter into the open. Your suppression fire won't distinguish. You'll have casualties that aren't on your target list." Morrison's posture shifted. Just slightly. His arms remained crossed, but his weight moved forward. "What else?" he asked. Maya pointed to the second building. "This structure. Intel says it's storage, but the roof has a washing line. 3 different colors of fabric. That's not a storage site. That's a residence with a courtyard. You hit it as a secondary target, you're killing a family." Silence. Danvers looked at Morrison. Morrison looked at Maya. "You got all that from a satellite photo?" Danvers said. His tone had lost its condescension. It was now merely suspicious. "No," Maya said. "I got it from watching people survive people like us for 15 years. Morrison didn't ask what that meant. Not yet. Instead, he nodded once. "We'll take it under advisement. That's all for today." It was not an endorsement, but it was also not a dismissal. Maya gathered her bag and walked out into the rain. She didn't look back. She had learned long ago that looking back was a luxury for people who expected to return. 3 days later, she was summoned again. This time, the room was smaller. Morrison sat alone at a metal table, a coffee mug in his hand that had probably been washed sometime during the first Bush administration. He didn't offer her a seat. She took one anyway. "I ran your name," he said. "Not through official channels, through people I trust in places you don't want to know about." Maya said nothing. "You were in the Bab el-Mandeb in 2014, not as security. You were on a Danish freighter that got hit by pirates. Official report says the crew retook the vessel. Unofficial report says the pirates were found bound and unconscious in the engine room." And the ship's captain refused to answer any questions. "That you?" "I was a passenger," Maya said. "Passengers don't carry riggers' knots." She didn't deny it. Morrison set down his mug. "I also heard about a compound outside Mosul, 2017. A hostage situation that resolved itself before our guys could get boots on the ground. 3 guards, all male, found locked in a basement. Hostage walked out clean. Local intel said a woman had come through asking about plumbing supplies the day before. Sound familiar?" "Plumbing is a universal need," Maya said. A sound escaped Morrison. It might have been a laugh. It was hard to tell. "Look," he said, "I don't know what you are. Intelligence asset? Private contractor with a savior complex? Something else entirely? What I do know is that my teams go into places where the difference between success and failure is measured in heartbeats. I need to know if you're an asset or a liability." Maya considered her words carefully. She had spent years cultivating anonymity, building a life in the spaces between official records. But she also knew that men like Morrison didn't ask questions they didn't already know the answers to. "I was a translator," she said, "in the early years. Iraq, then Afghanistan. I worked with civil affairs units mostly, talking to village elders, negotiating road repairs, explaining why their sons didn't need to join the insurgency to feel like men." Morrison waited. "One day, a unit I was embedded with got hit by an IED. The interpreter before me had been killed that way, so they kept me in the rear. I heard the explosion from the FOB. By the time we got there, 3 soldiers were dead. The 4th, a young captain, was still alive. His legs were pinned under the vehicle. I stayed with him while we waited for extraction. He kept asking me to tell his wife he loved her. I promised I would." Her voice remained steady. "He died before the helicopter landed. I found his wife's contact info in his effects and called her from a satellite phone. I told her everything he said. She asked me who I was. I said I was just someone who was there." Morrison didn't interrupt. "After that, I couldn't just translate anymore. I started going on patrols, not to fight. I'm not a fighter. But I could see things the soldiers couldn't. Which kids were being watched too closely by the men in the marketplace. Which wells had suddenly become off-limits to certain families. The signs of coercion, of trafficking, of the slow creep of exploitation that happens before the shooting starts." She paused. "I kept doing it after I left the sandbox. Freighters in the Gulf, refugee camps in Greece, border towns in Central America. I don't work for governments. I work for people who need someone to notice what everyone else is ignoring." Morrison studied her. The rain had stopped, and pale sunlight filtered through the blinds, striping the table in gold and shadow. "The tattoo," he said. "On your back. What is it?" Maya's expression didn't change, but something in her posture tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's not relevant." "It is if you're going to be in a room with my men. We don't keep secrets from each other. Not ones that matter." A long silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, Maya stood. She turned her back to him, lifted the hem of her shirt, and exposed the lower half of her spine. The tattoo was intricate, rendered in deep indigo and black ink. At first glance, it appeared to be a traditional Polynesian or Maori design, the kind of geometric patterns that spoke of heritage and lineage. But Morrison had seen enough ink in his career to recognize what this really was. It wasn't merely decorative. It was a map. Specifically, it was a constellation of coordinates, woven so artfully into the curves and spirals that only someone who knew what to look for could decipher them. Some were faded, clearly years old. Others were fresher, the lines crisper. Each one represented a place. Each place represented a person. The first one, Maya said quietly, is a village in Helmand Province. A little girl who was being sold to a man 3 times her age. I got her out, but I couldn't get her family out. They died in the crossfire 3 weeks later. I carry them here. Her finger traced a second set of numbers. This is a detention center off the Libyan coast. 700 people crammed into a warehouse. I spent 6 weeks posing as a humanitarian aid worker to map the facility. When the raid finally came, I led a group of women and children through a sewage pipe to a waiting boat. 3 of them still send me Christmas cards. A third coordinate. This one is a ranch in Chihuahua. It wasn't a rescue. It was a recovery. A young journalist who had been investigating cartel recruitment of American teenagers. She was already dead by the time I found her. But I found her. I brought her home so her mother could bury her. Morrison didn't speak. His coffee had gone cold. Maya lowered her shirt and turned back to face him. Her eyes were dry, but her voice carried the weight of every name she hadn't spoken aloud. I don't wear this ink for decoration, Commander. I wear it because I refuse to forget. Every person I couldn't save, every place I failed, every moment I was too slow or too weak or too late, it's on my skin. I don't get to look away. The room felt very small. Morrison picked up his mug, set it down again. When he finally spoke, his voice was rougher than before. You ever think about getting it removed? Starting fresh? Maya shook her head. You don't get to start fresh. You just get to keep going. He nodded slowly. It was not an agreement exactly. It was acknowledgement. All right, he said. You're in. Provisional clearance, 90-day probationary period. You report to me and me only. You see something, you say something. You don't go anywhere without my authorization. Understood? Understood. She stood to leave. At the door, his voice stopped her. Rivas. She turned. Morrison's expression was unreadable, but his eyes held something that wasn't quite respect yet. It was closer to recognition. That captain, he said. The one who died in Iraq. His wife remarried. Has 2 kids now. Lives in San Diego. Maya said nothing. She named her oldest after him. The kid's 17. Plays varsity baseball. A long pause. Then, quietly, she knows you weren't just someone. She always knew. Maya's composure didn't crack, but her fingers, curled around the strap of her bag, tightened until the knuckles whitened. Thank you, she said, for telling me. She walked out. Over the next 8 weeks, Maya proved her worth in ways that had nothing to do with gunfire. She sat in on planning sessions and noticed that the photographs of a target's compound showed the same dog in 3 different positions, which meant the animal wasn't a stray, but a trained alert. She flagged a seemingly innocuous shipping manifest that revealed a new smuggling route for precursor chemicals used in IEDs. She listened to hours of drone footage audio and isolated the sound of a child's cough that indicated the presence of a respiratory illness spreading through a village. Information that allowed civil affairs to pre-position medical supplies before a predicted outbreak. The SEALs didn't embrace her. Yeah, they were not men who embraced outsiders. But they stopped treating her like furniture. Danvers, the breacher, began nodding at her when she entered a room. Others asked her opinion on terrain features, local customs, the subtle social hierarchies that shifted like sand.